Hi, I'm Jim Hemphill, features writer from IndieWire, and this is our craft roundtable on costume design, the craft that helps define character through style, texture, and detail. From subtle choices through bold statements, costumes play a key role in how stories are told on screen. Our guests today are from Spider-Noir, Trayce Gigi Field, from Love Story, Rudy Mance, from Euphoria, Natasha Newman-Thomas, from Hacks and the Paper, Kathleen Felix-Hager, and from The Beauty, Sarah Evelyn. Sarah and Rudy, I'm going to start with you since you're both on Ryan Murphy shows. And Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember the last time we talked, you told me that Ryan Murphy actually has a position that is costume producer. So how does that work?
Costume producer is Lou Eyrich. The idea is really to help streamline things for the department. And also at the moments that there are very big creative asks in costume design, which happens all the time. In costume design, you know, like, I wish we were just designers, but also we actually do, depending on where you are, have a big hand in the budget and the labor. So it's like sometimes when those big creative asks come, the most difficult part is being like, how am I going to get enough time in the day to go make my case to the producers and do the creative I need to do? And I feel like at that moment, Lou Eyrich also will get involved and kind of like go do that battle for you. Like, here is what the department needs to make this happen so that you can just focus on the creative, which I wish I had this on every single show of mine. You know, sometimes I feel like, oh my God, I just got to design for 75 seconds. That was amazing, because you feel like your whole day can be taken up with logistics, especially the bigger and bigger all these shows get.
Another great way to work with Lou is, you know, Ryan Murphy really does treat the costumes like a main character. And so he likes to look at every fitting photo. He likes to approve every single look that goes to camera. And with Ryan, you know, he has anywhere from 3 to 7 or 8 shows going at the same time. So Lou really is a conduit to get to him to get everything approved and keep everything on schedule.
I'm just curious, for the rest of you, have you also found in your experience that it's like what Sarah's saying, where you spend a lot more of your time than people might think on logistics rather than actual designing?
Absolutely. I feel like I'm split down the middle. It's like half organization and like half like creative.
Problem solving.
You know what I mean? It's like you've got to like have that brain in order to like make sure that everything is gonna happen when it needs to happen. Also, just like, how much is this gonna cost, and do I have to go fight for something? And so having multiple skills, like, yes, I love the creative part. If I only had to do the creative part, like, oh my God. But that's not the case. So it's like, you know, you really do need to understand your budget, and you really do have to have the skills to go and talk to a producer about, you know, negotiations in terms of money. And so I think that people don't really realize that that's part of our job. And I mean, I wish it wasn't, but that's just the way it is.
I feel like it's just a relationship that you build, and I'm sure that is the case with like Lou or Ryan, whatever, whoever you're working with. Like, the more you work with them, the more they trust you. Some of those decisions, they will allow you to, like, you know, just run with the creative. I mean, there is an approval process on every show. Some are more hands-on than others, but I feel like I've been really fortunate on Hacks to be able to let the characters and the costumes sort of be such a creative part of telling the story of these people on the show, and I felt very appreciated by my producers in that endeavor, which I think is maybe kind of rare.
When you do multiple projects with the same producers and they know you, you know, it's like you definitely have more leeway, and they definitely trust you. And like, you know, the producers that I work with, they know that I'm never gonna ask for something unless I really need it. Like, they know that I'm level-headed. They know that I'm not gonna come and say I have to spend like $20,000 on a dress unless I really do need to spend $20,000 on a dress. So it's like cultivating those relationships, I think, is extremely important, and it does help, you know, grease the wheels a little bit about, you know, having a space to be even more creative, because you know that you can go and ask for things and they might give it to you.
I agree that if you really build that trust, then it helps. But I also feel like if you have a great costume supervisor that you work with, it definitely helps give you a little more creative time. I feel very blessed to have a costume supervisor that takes a lot of that off my plate, and just numbers-wise, it's always a constant discussion, but it definitely gives me a little more room to be creative.
Well, and all of these shows that we're talking about today are like massively ambitious. As department heads, how do you manage the number of people you have to manage and kind of make sure that everyone's on the same page, making the same show?
You're the person that everyone is looking to. So it's like how you lead your crew is a lot of times how your crew is going to behave. Also, they're really tired. Like, you got to get people to do things for you, all that stuff. Honestly, I haven't figured out yet. My solve is not sleeping much. You know, like I feel like the daytime is for questions, and then when everyone goes home, like the nighttime is for designing. I can't wait till the moment that that's not the case. Every show I'm like, maybe this is a show where, you know, but so far, no.
I mean, I'm nothing without my team, and I have such an amazing team. And I was doing Hacks, and I also do a show called The Paper, and they overlapped a little bit, so that was my first time experiencing working on 2 shows at the same time, which was a lot of juggling and time. I would call Trayce and be like, how does this work? Because she's done it a lot. And it's tricky, and so you really have to depend on your crews, and, you know, costume design is, yes, we're the head of the department, but it's very much a village to take these big, massive shows that we do to get all the costumes. And it's not just the principals, it's, you know, background actors, and it all tells the story. And Hacks especially is a really big show. It's a little half-hour comedy, but it's such a big scale. We shoot multiple episodes at the same time. And we started out the season on location, so we had just the logistics of everything was a big, huge puzzle. So my supervisor's incredible, and just grateful to work with a team that supports me in such a tangible way.
Yeah, you're always as good as your team.
Yeah.
And, you know, the team is the most important, you know.
Yeah, I
and I'm
agree.
talking, you know, from all of us as designers down to the PAs, you know. Every single job is important
Yeah.
and necessary.
I mean, on Spider-Noir, it was the best costume department I've ever had in my career. I do think as the costume designer, you set the tone. I have a very strong work ethic, and, you know, I think that I've heard that people say that if you work with me, you have to work hard. And I actually take that as a compliment, because it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm working hard. It's like, I want to do the best job possible, and I am an overachiever. And I'm very hands-on, so like everybody in my department knows me. They know they can come and talk to me. You know, I'm always on the trailer, I'm always on set, I'm always in the office, I'm like everywhere. And I literally talk to everyone in my department. Even though I had like 45 people, it's like between the workroom and like the people that were on set and in the office, it's like very much a community, and it's very much a collaborative effort. I can't do it by myself, and I rely on them. And so I want them to be able to rely on me as well.
Talk a little bit about what some of the references and influences were for Spider-Noir, because one of the really cool things about that show is these very different worlds it's coming from that you kind of unify.
The comic book itself was something that, you know, inspired me, only because I really wanted the actual villains to like kind of correlate with the color palette, and also just have a feel so that when they, you know, when you first see them, you know exactly who they are. And in terms of like reference, I mean, Humphrey Bogart was a big one for Nick Cage, just even down to like the trench coat that he wore. You know, we tried to get really specific with those kinds of things, and also reference the 30s. It was a lot to put those 2 worlds together, I think.
Say nighty-night and kiss me. Just hold me tight and tell me you'll miss me while I'm alone and blue as can be. Dream a little dream of me.
And how important were the hats? I mean, I feel like that's the big thing in this show.
The hats are super important in the way that, like, for me, they complete the look. For the femme fatale, for Kat Hardy, like, those hats really, like, sealed the deal. They just gave her the that she needed. We needed a specific block, which is how you create a hat. We found it in the Ukraine. We got it just in time, which I'm sure everyone can relate to. The fitting was the day before we were supposed to shoot it. So, you know, no stress, no pressure, but like it's those kinds of things I think that like I thrive on, but also freak me out. It's like, it's such a big part of the job, but also you just gotta like, you're putting out fires every day, and you're also just like, well, I gotta do what I gotta do. So do I need to get on the plane and go to the Ukraine and get the, like, you know, I've offered to do that so many times. Like,
Thinking about like having to get stuff from the Ukraine or Japan, Etsy, or the things you're talking about, I mean, how much of your job is this kind of detective work almost of just like having to find this stuff?
So much.
Yeah.
Like late at night, you're like, okay, I can't sleep, so I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna look for it on my phone. And sometimes it's the golden hour. You're like, oh my God, I found it.
This season of Euphoria, at least, we'd get rewrites a lot throughout the season. So there would be an item that I thought was like pretty hard to source that would then connect to a scene that was an action scene that was originally not supposed to need multiples.
Oh no.
And then you have to source multiples or create them. And all of those resources are very helpful. The eBays, the Etsys, the Depop's.
I feel like that's why it's like never just like, oh, it's just costumes. Like even you'll have a situation of something that should be really easy, like scrubs. Oh, but you got some rewrites, or a script came out, or an actor was cast last minute, and you get their casting, and the scrub store is closed, and the director has asked you for blue scrubs, but you only have green scrubs, and they work the next morning first thing, but they have to go into hair and makeup first. Like, you are not going to deliver those scrubs. It's your job, but all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm out like on a scrub show. Like, why is it like as if I'm like on a 1940 show looking for a hat block from the Ukraine? Like, you're like, I'm gonna have to break into the scrub store. Like, you're like, A, do I break into the scrub store? B, do I know anyone on a scrub show? Not in LA. Okay, in New York, do I fly to New York? It's just like.
Can I get a costume house to open up early for me?
This happens in every costume department now, just because the shows are big, the casting is last minute, you know, and it's like, we really feel it's our job to deliver.
Always.
Sarah, don't worry, they cut that scene.
I know, oh my God, precisely.
That is absolutely what happens. We have like jumped through so many fiery hoops, like get the thing in the right color. We got it on the actor, we're ready to go, and they're like, yeah, no, so we're not gonna shoot that part of the scene. We're gonna like rewrite that. And you're like, wah, wah.
Or like you said, you need 14 multiples.
Yeah.
They used 2.
Exactly. Well, yeah,
Always.
the Cassie's wedding dress.
But it's
many
better
did
to
you
have
make?
too many.
7.
Yeah, but it's like no is not an option. Like that's
no
not
is
in
never an
your
option.
like vocabulary.
Better to
So
be
like
more
I
prepared.
feel like we're all problem solvers, right? Someone throws something at you and you're like in real life you would be like, well, that's impossible. I can't do that. But in your work life, you're like, oh my God, I got to figure out how to make this happen in 10 hours. So it's a different way of thinking. Like there's no is not an option.
And then Rudy, on Love Story, I have to say, like, the period detail is incredible. What was the research process like?
Everywhere, and I think we can all attest to this. It's like every book you can find, every magazine you can find, every Instagram account you can find. And again, going back to you're only as good as your team, I mean, they would find weird, random, accounts that would have grainy black and white footage from a video camera, and and they would do stills from that. And so in dressing the two of them, my team and I really tried to be as exact as possible. We had so many fittings. I mean, the actors shoot anywhere from 8 till 15 hours a day, and then we either can get them for 15 minutes before they go through hair and makeup at 5 a.m. or if you don't tell the ADs and you sneak in a fitting at lunch if they're okay with it. With Paul, I would be like, so we have about 15 looks to do, and I know you just shot for 12 hours, but like, do you want a drink? And so, but they were both incredible. They wanted to get it just as right and just as accurate as I did. It sort of looked like by the end of the shoot, the fitting room looked like, I was like a crazy, like obsessive serial killer, because it was literally every single photograph I could find of the two of them. And then, once you would get the script, you would sort of look at, all right, like, let's do this look for here. And then, I would show them the picture of what we were recreating, and then they would do the same pose, and then we would do a side by side. And so yeah, it was just, wherever we could find the stuff then. And then if we couldn't find it, we would make it. But my team went everywhere from, like Etsy in the Ukraine for a Prada bag, a coat that she wore that was like a men's Patagonia coat, like not fashion at all, but like we found one in like on Japanese eBay. Wow. And so it was, wherever we could find the stuff, we did.
Justice and cure his heart.
How did you approach, for Carolyn, like the scenes before she was in the public eye?
Yeah, that was one of the trickiest parts. I essentially worked backwards, where I looked at the pieces of clothing that she was wearing, the designers that she was choosing to wear, and then I sort of worked backwards, and I let that sort of inform me, you know, where she had started and then where she ended, and then just evaluated it that way.
Mm-hmm. Now, Natasha, with Euphoria, what kinds of conversations did you have with Sam Levinson about where you were going to take the characters this season? Because there's this sort of jump forward in time. They all kind of have looks that are evolutions of where they've been, but they all are very different.
Well, I read the first several scripts, and then Sam and I kind of put a whole day aside in pre-production to sort of just dream together and talk about what happened in those 5 years and how it would inform their new identities as young adults. I mean, Lexi, it felt like the natural progression. She probably went to like liberal arts college and got really into like vintage because someone told her how bad fast fashion is for the environment. And like then she realized, oh, I can embrace my individualism by buying pieces that no one else can find, and kind of bringing that into this Hollywood lens of like working behind the scenes and also projecting like her fantasy of a success story there, and kind of like dressing for the job she wants with the means she's given.
Now, how did you approach Rue? Because I've heard you, in other interviews, I've heard you describe like Rue as kind of a chameleon, like she kind of adapts to her environment. So how did that inform your approach to her costumes?
In my mind, she's just kind of collecting things wherever she goes and assimilates into that world. Like in Mexico, she wears shirts she maybe found, you know, in the bar there. When she's in Laurie's world, it's a little bit more workwear adjacent. And once she starts working at the Silver Slipper, you see kind of slight Western tinges, but it's always like very subtle because you don't want to feel a big emotional shift. It's just kind of her working her way through each world under the radar.
And then how did you approach a new character like Alamo, who's got a great look?
Alamo is so fun, but they originally had someone else come in for the camera test and were like, this is who we're gonna cast. And so there was this real clear vision that Sam and I had when that guy came in. And then when they recast Ed Wale, it just went out the window and we started over because he is such a big presence and the energy was so different. Like you didn't need to say quite as much with his costumes because his energy does that on its own.
Now, Kathleen, you talked about there being some overlap between Hacks and the paper. And so I guess first I'm curious with Hacks, talk a little bit about how you see Deborah and Ava's costumes having evolved.
Yeah, I mean, we first meet the character of Ava, you know, she's in her early 20s, just coming to LA. She's new, she wants to be a writer. She has a very kind of almost juvenile aspect to her wardrobe at that point. By the end of the series, she's 30. So we were really conscious every year of showing her evolution, just growing up a little bit. By season 5, she's making money. So she was able to buy like investment pieces. Her basic vibe is the same, but it's just more sophisticated and just more grown up.
I'm going to compete in the best audiobook category by recording my memoir.
You wrote a memoir? That's great.
Well, no, not yet. But I happen to know the best writer in the world.
Oh.
Tony Kushner.
Hey, what about me?
You can't write my memoir. You're too obsessed with me.
It's cool. I gave up on developing my prose skills when I realized Gen Alpha can't read.
It was interesting for me to work with Hannah, the actress, because it was a very similar journey in her personal, like she was in her early 20s. Hacks was her first show. She wasn't that confident, you know? I mean, it was all new. So it was a very similar trajectory of her growth with Ava's growth. So it was really interesting to explore that with her. It was very important for Hannah to represent all that Ava was, you know, this young, queer, kind of messy person that was searching. So we really tried to make her as real as we could.
And what are the advantages of being on a show like that where you're on it for several years and getting to know the actors?
I mean, that relationship is everything. Like when you're in the fitting room with an actor, when you first start the process, it's all like a game, right? You're trying to figure out who this person is, who this character is, and you're trying on these pieces. And then there's a moment in the fitting where the actor will put something on. I'm sure everyone's experienced it, where like they're like, oh, all of a sudden they stand different and they start to walk a little different and they start to, like, you can see them embody this character, and that's like magic, right? I mean, it's so incredible to be part of that process and help an actor like feel that way.
You always know you've hit the mark when the actor starts reciting their lines, because they're like, I'm the character now, look at me. And then they're like trying it on for size. And so I always feel like that's the moment where you like really know that you've done a good job and help them create the visual storytelling of that character.
And then I always feel like if it doesn't work in the fitting room, it's never going to work on camera. It's never going to work when they put it in their trailer. I never want to talk an actor into anything because I feel like there's always another option. It's never going to be right. They're going to get on camera and feel...
Well, you never want to put any actor in anything that they're uncomfortable with. You know,
or
like
anything that'll detract from the performance, that will take them out of that mental headspace of the character.
Well, Sarah, you know, your show, The Beauty, is obviously like I would think, a dream for a costume designer because it's set in this world of high fashion.
Yeah.
And the use of color in the show is really incredible. And I'm curious, like, what kind of collaboration do you have with the production designer and the DP on that show?
One thing that is amazing about working with Ryan is that, like, a lot of times really to do that, you need that driven from the top, or everyone else doesn't make space and time for it. Like, we actually did so many camera tests, so much R&D. It's such an amazing dream because I do feel like that makes the frame look so much better, and you can say so much with color if it's coordinated.
What were some of the cinematic influences?
Bertolucci definitely was a big one. Ryan usually has ideas in his head, but he came to this meeting and the references were The Leopard, Passengers, and Last Tango in Paris, like kind of thematically and vibe and color, and The Hunger. And I was like, this is gonna be the best project ever. Also the hardest. I mean, I watched those movies so many times. He started with those 3 references, but like other things would creep in and you'd kind of like add it and subtract something else. Like, for example, in the beginning, we were gonna do a lot of oxblood and fluorescent green, but fluorescent green ended up falling off. You know, and I think other, like peach and like purple came into play.
We live in a world of perpetual upgrades, from iPhones to toothpaste to semi-glutides. If my Ponce de Leon boosters keep them alive and forever young, they'll be begging for it, like a diabetic cries out for insulin. That's like, what, 6 shots a day? There he is. Hey.
Kathleen, we talked about Hacks, but I want to talk about The Paper also. It's a new series, but it's also a spin-off of The Office. So is there an attempt to kind of, you know, I don't know, are there things from the visual language of The Office that influenced this that you wanted to carry over?
I approached it starting from scratch. The Paper is a very different show from The Office. It's a mockumentary, and it's a workplace comedy, and told in that same style, but you can never replicate The Office. And so I wanted these people in this world to feel real and current and now. And we have a very diverse cast. People have backstories. We try to keep them really grounded in reality, but also they have very distinct personal style. Like, The Office was of a time, and it's in its, you know, perfect little time capsule bubble. But it was fun to be able to, like, bring those things that people loved about The Office, but add a new layer of storytelling to the world.
Hey, I'm Ned. The door seems to be locked.
Yeah, because I locked it.
She locked it.
I'm Ned Sampson. I start here today. You can let me out.
We had a security breach a month ago. Can't be too sure.
Yeah, a guy on acid wandered in from a jazz festival.
Okay, well, that wasn't me.
Another one of those acid guys?
Yep.
Damn, must be the soft lighting.
What are the challenges of creating costumes for a show like that, where it's a workplace comedy? So in a way, there's, you know, kind of a similar look that everybody's going to have, but you also have to differentiate between them?
We didn't want them to look office-y, so to speak. Esmeralda character, Sabrina Impacciatore, she's Italian. So we created this whole backstory, Sabrina and I, about she's Italian, she's, you know, she's divorced, she has a child, she's brought a bunch of clothes from Italy with her, but she shops secondhand, she shops thrift, she buys on the real, like, so she's able to afford Dolce and all these beautiful clothes. So I feel like that helped me expand and tell the story in a way that was more fun visually for her.
I did want to ask Rudy one last question about Love Story, because to me, like, the great thing about that show is it really kind of makes you as a viewer fall in love with them as they're falling in love with each other. And I'm wondering if that was something that was on your mind in terms of the costumes.
Yeah, I mean, there was one note from Ryan was he said, you know, it's in the title, it's Love Story, so anytime you can make it feel romantic or sexy or, you know, just real, do that. And so yeah, that's how I approached it. And you know, as you said, there were, you know, hundreds and hundreds of photos of the two of them, but it was looking at those and it's like, you know, yes, she's wearing Yohji and Prada and all of these incredible designers, but like, how does that translate into our story? You know, like, 'cause she's not wearing that ball gown, you know, at 2 a.m. at home. And so it was, you know, that was sort of the dance of, you know, how to take those real outfits that they wore, but translate them into the show.
Again, because it's such a precise evocation of the period. I mean, do you remember what some of the hardest things were for you to find that you had to have?
Ooh, I mean, the whole project was a scavenger hunt. Obviously, the wedding dress, which we made and had to make 3 of, that was the hardest and probably one of the most photographed dresses of all time. So I knew that had to really be spot on. And then we were really lucky because a lot of the fashion houses like Yohji Yamamoto, Prada, Manolo Blahnik, Valentino, and a handful of others, they all let us into their archives. So we were pretty lucky. But there was one, it was scripted, one of the final scenes, Carolyn Bessette, the character, was wearing this beautiful Yohji Yamamoto suit that had a sort of tan and black ruffle. And we went to Yohji, but they didn't even have it in their archives. So then we had to make it. So it's, you know, we all know it's like, you search for it, sometimes it's just not out there and then you have to make it. But then, you know, that's part of the fun. So long as you have more than like a day or two.
A day, yeah. Just give me 24
which sometimes
hours
which
and some
sometimes
money,
you don't,
you.
you know? Yeah. So, but it's like, don't you guys think like if it's too easy, like
something's wrong?
Yeah,
if
it's very unsettling.
Yeah,
when
you're just like, that went way too well.
Yeah.
Something's gonna be thrown. I have to just say, so for Spider-Noir, creating the super suit for the spider, we like initially started and I found the most amazing leather. It actually had stretch in it. It only comes from France. France shuts down for a month, you know, because they take a siesta unlike us in the US. And so I had to have this leather. And my 2 assistants were like, okay, we tried to get the leather, we can't get the leather. They're showing me other options and I was like, you guys, I need that leather. Like, I know it's the leather that we need. And so, thank goodness, Daniel, he found a source in New York that actually carried the French leather, and I got my dream, which made me so happy. But it's like those little things you get like really attached to because you know inherently it's the perfect thing. And now when I look at the spider, I'm like, see, I'm so glad I fought for that leather because it is the thing that makes that costume perfect.
Natasha, you mentioned a couple times the wedding dress. So talk a little bit about the design of the wedding dress and working with Sydney Sweeney on that and, you know, how you came to the look that you arrived at.
I mean, I had a vision of what elements I wanted to have in the dress. Like I wanted it to be super snatched. I wanted it to have a corset. I wanted it to have this big knot in the back. And I reached out to Jackson Wiederhoff, who's a great designer of all clothes, but particularly bridal, to see if he would collaborate with me because he is better at corsetry than I am. I actually sent Sydney, she happened to be in New York where he's based, and I sent her to his office just to do a corset fitting so we'd understand how it worked on her body before we like got far into the meat of the design. So he sent me lots of photos of her in one of his corsets, and actually, while she was there, she like totally fell in love with his work and ended up wearing one of his pieces to an event a few months later. But it just was a collaboration where I'd send him references, he'd send me sketches back, he'd overnight me fabrics. And of course, you have to keep the budget in mind. So there were fabrics I fell in love with and was like, this is the one. And he'd tell me, and I'd be like, we can't afford it. So what's the next?
There's 2 yards left.
Yeah, or there's 2 yards left. Be like, okay, well, what's similar? Because that's what I want. And we got to a place where we were both just really happy. And then we lost Sydney from shooting for like a month and needed to fit that dress on her in that time. And originally I was gonna meet Jackson in Spain where Sydney was just to fit the dress. And then other things came up in production and I was like, you just go send me pictures, send me videos. It just has to be perfect. But he went to fit the muslin version on her in Spain. And then we ended up with what you saw.
On the beauty for somebody like the Anthony Ramos character, who's like got such a great look. Like, how did you arrive at his clothes?
I mean, I think, again, like a lot of the beauty was very Ryan directed. So Ryan definitely starts being like, I want it to be sleek. I want it to be black. I want it to be shiny. And I do have to say, like, the characters on this beauty specifically, a lot of them did have backstories. But I do think it's like when you are working with someone, if they don't have a backstory, you have to make it up because otherwise, like, what are your rules? So I would have made up a backstory. No. So he had a backstory. And then ultimately what it really came down to is Anthony looking in the clothes kind of like the way we want him to, which is a lot more difficult in general than one thinks. You know, like you can put X on one person and it looks magical, and you put Y on them and it just doesn't have that same magic that you guys were talking about where they like inhabit the character. So actually for Anthony, we did a couple rounds of fittings because at first it was like, he's a businessman, but he's sleek. And we put him in some gorgeous suiting. And Ryan was like, that feels too formal. Which, you know, ultimately, like, I understood, like, what we ended up with for him was like something that gave another texture to our world. So we went back in and we were like, okay, what about like alligator skin or like mock croc leather? And we actually made a trench coat because it's so hard to get leather coats that fit really well. So we made this gorgeous trench coat. My made-to-order person, like Catherine Bailey, like pieced it together with the leather worker. So like the croc lined up, it was stunning. And we put that on him with a pair of like black pants and a Chelsea boot. And it was like, boom. You know, like he felt it. That was the moment when Ryan was like, yes, that's it. So that became our jumping off point for him, right? Like how were we gonna one-up that every time? So there was a lot of custom leather, basically. And then it just turned into like all custom clothing, sort of.
Well, and you talk about one-upping, you know, one of the craziest characters in the show is the Isabella Rossellini character in terms of her clothes. I mean, what was the thinking there?
That was just like really such an amazing experience. When we were first talking about Mrs. Corporation, Ryan was like, okay, I see her in Victorian morning dress, which he's obsessed with Victorian morning dress in general. I see her in Victorian morning dress. I feel that she has very long nails, like, and she wears crazy hats. But then Isabella Rossellini got cast, by the way, of course, last minute. Of course, she's out of the country. Of course, she can't come until like literally 2 days before. And he was like, I think this has color. And I think that this is whimsical. So I put together a board just of all these different images, doing all your research you do. And it's like, we show it to Ryan and he's sort of like this, this, and this. So the board did have the big like Tudor era skirts. We always sort of kept to that silhouette, but it really got much more like tongue in cheek and much more colorful. So then we had like 2 weeks. She was literally coming in like the day before she was working, I feel like. So now you just kind of have to make garments, you know, like go everywhere you can, go to every single archive that will let you in, go to every single costume house that will rent you something. And also we brought in this guy named Jonathan Nipscher who builds for the Met. And we were like, okay, here is the closet we're gonna make for her, including hats. And it was really, really just ended up being a really meaningful, like phenomenal experience. especially when you're making this character sort of like that kind of has no reference with Isabella Rossellini on this show about like beauty and aging. It was just like, I just felt like it was like a mirror and a mirror and a mirror and a mirror, you know?
Well, and we've been talking a lot about these sort of more stylized costumes and stuff on the show, but then you've also got to create the agents, which is a much, in a way like much quote unquote plainer.
Yes.
But is that something that is also, is there a challenge to that? Like that's the kind of thing that I think we don't really think about when we're watching the show, just as a fan watching the show. I'm not thinking about the costumes that the FBI agents are wearing. I'm just wearing, thinking about all the crazy Isabella Rossellini hats and stuff.
I think that's a really good point. And sometimes I find on shows, it's actually harder to do the simpler things or the things that need to look more nuanced or look more real. So for example, for Cooper, our reference for Cooper really was Steve McQueen. And he really wanted a suit that was gonna fit like Steve McQueen and look like Steve McQueen. But Steve McQueen is one person and Evan is another person. And it's like how to get that kind of suit on that kind of person with that kind of look. So we did a lot of custom making. We actually, our cutter fitter was this guy named Daniel Weger, and he is a menswear tailor. And we did custom suits in New York. So for Evan, we worked really hard on getting really specific custom suits, like the right drape of the fabric, the exact cut of the suit, and also same with the shirts. Like shirts the collar of the shirt, the feel of the shirt, the way the shirt lays, like all of these things can really say so much. So for him, it was really meticulous head to toe. Rebecca Hall is, basically a fashion model. So it was like, you put anything on her and you're like, well, that looks amazing. So she was in a lot of ways a lot easier, but how are we gonna have a character that fit in this world, that wasn't too highly stylized, but had a point of view and wasn't gonna bump you, I felt like a lot of it was like, how do you make everyone have the right volume so they can all exist in this world together and it feels natural? For the rest of the FBI, all of that was just keep it very like Mindhunter, just like very simple, kind of like light greens, navy blues, black, white, just like very toned down.
I'm just curious, I saw a little bit of nodding. Like, have you also found that it's true that sometimes the things that seem theoretically like they should be the simplest are actually the most difficult?
Yes.
I mean, I feel like the flashy costumes are so fun to do, and creatively, like, you get to flex your muscles and play around and do these fun things. But like when you're trying to do something that's both the hacks and the paper are, the sort of template for both are like grounded in reality. Like this has to be real. Like, so that's always sort of like my fallback with those two shows. But I think sometimes when you're trying to do something subtle and real, lived in, all of those things that they're unsung as far as like maybe the viewer, but I feel like I do notice when people do shows that they're like, oh, that looks so real. Like I think you do such a beautiful job on Euphoria that's like, it's so amazing because you're like, oh my, this looks like they look like real people. Like, so you want them, like that's a specific talent, I think, it's under celebrated.
Yeah. So is background too.
Yeah.
It's background characters are so important. I mean, it's like they can make or break any show.
Because you're
like
doing the
world.
world.
Yeah.
The world.
I mean, they're the set deck in front of the set deck, kind of,
I love that we all said the
true.
same thing.
Yeah.
It's so true, though.
Yeah, well, and I agree, like what you were saying about Euphoria, like Maddie and Lexi's characters, like I feel like you do such an incredible job with the two of them in terms of them kind of entering this adult Hollywood world. Like they look like so many women that I've known, like in those kinds of jobs. Talk a little bit about like what your approach was.
Alexa, Maddie, we kind of justified her wearing more vintage and designer because she kind of has all these PR connections and is able to pull, newer designer pieces on loan for her clients. And she works for this woman who has an insane vintage archive who's been in the business forever. And, our story was that she discards, her vintage designer pieces from the 80s and 90s, and Maddie kind of saves them and gets them tailored and reworks them for her own her own wardrobe. And, you know, a lot of the characters are faking it till they make it this season.
Well, and there's also, you know, we were talking about The Paper as a workplace comedy. There's also kind of a workplace comedy buried in Euphoria at the Silver Slipper. I mean, it's almost like kind of a, you know, workplace comedy. Talk a little bit about what your approach was to the dancers at the Silver Slipper.
Oh, well, that I actually collaborated a lot with my key costumer who was in charge of the background. We kind of did the background together, but they're so important in building that world out. I mean, there's only so many stripper stores you can go to, and I think we sourced every piece of like burlesque that was available at the costume houses in Los Angeles to kind of create this new version of a strip club that's got a little bit of a timeless feel and a little less traditional. But Adrian, the key costumer on the project, because our budget was not what you would think, would get lots of like free lingerie, and then just anytime he wasn't on set or like doing other things, he'd be rhinestoning. And our background set person, like if she had a down moment, was just putting rhinestones on lingerie.
Well, thank you all so much for doing this, for talking with me. This has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you.